Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our June 2024 regular board meeting. I'd like to start us off in a good way by recognizing and acknowledging both the Esquimalt and the Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Trustees, may I have a mover to approve this evening's agenda? Thank you, Trustee Mabobi, seconded by Trustee David. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of approval of the agenda with a show of hands? And that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. All right, so we do have minutes to approve under A3. These are the May 27th regular board meeting minutes. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Trustee Mabobi, and a seconder, Trustee Kwan. Thank you. Any changes or amendments to those minutes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the May regular board meeting minutes with a show of hands. There we go. I got us there in the end. That's unanimous. Thanks, everybody. Is there any business arising from those minutes? Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered, I think we had discussed, or from Annie's presentation from that last meeting with regards to music rooms being lost with capacities. And I wondered if any more thought had been given as to how to accommodate those. I know in the past we've seen trying to accommodate them with portables. I know in the case of Tillicum, we were able to do that. And if there was any other possibilities that we had looked into as far as accommodating those music classrooms next year. I think specifically at Vic West and Doncaster were the two schools that are having issues next year.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Superintendent? Oh, sorry, Superintendent. I think, well, you are on mute.
How about now?
There we go. We can hear you
There
just
we
fine.
go. Okay. So the chair, I can take that one. I'll focus at Vic West. We are certainly at capacity. That means that the number of students that are coming in, we require all classrooms, including the classroom or the Learning Studio portable that was used last year as a music classroom, is needed to accept all of our catchment students. So in that case, there's absolutely no other space. We look at all rooms, all spaces to see if there's any way that we can have the catchment students fit in our school. And that one, we were completely at capacity. Doncaster, bit different. There is a multi-purpose room, but it is a not quite classroom size. And so the other room that was a music room that is a really large classroom. Also, the number of students enrolled at Doncaster has gone up significantly, counter to what our projections were. So it's a bit of a surprise that our numbers are gone that high in that area. But the projections have changed, and now that area, Trustee Kwan, as you well know, you're nodding your head because you know the area well, continue to go up. And so we're in that situation where we're trying to welcome all students, all catchment students into our catchment schools. And we are in the place where we make tough decisions that we necessarily, I know that we're not wanting to make, but have to for capacity reasons.
Trustee Kwan, follow up, and then I will move to Trustee Painter.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there, Associate Superintendent. I guess my follow-up is then, as far as capacity issues go, I would imagine if we're on that trajectory, perhaps what plans are for those schools in general, if that's kind of the trajectory we're on, and perhaps maybe that's not something that you can answer right now, and perhaps it's Director Vistesen that would be able to answer directly as well. But if there's any plans with regards to expansion or what we're going to do once we're at capacity, but definitely not a bad problem to have as far as the students enrolling. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. We revisit our facility plan at least once a month, and sometimes more than that when we have tough decisions to make. We look at projections, and it doesn't. It's not a heterogeneous increase or decrease. It seems to happen in different pots in Victoria, depending where you are. And so you discuss long-term plans such as redrawing catchment boundaries, or to allow that some schools, we have schools that have some spaces in them. So it's a conversation that continues to happen, and we have to think at least a year out, Trustee Kwan, because when we're looking at when we have to drop a portable or a learning studio, it does take a year for our facilities department to get the everything in place to make that happen. So yeah, conversation that continues to happen. And we look at it community by community by community, depending on which ones have capacity. So at the moment, we have quite a number of our elementary schools, especially grades 2 to 5, that were larger than we have been in a long, long time.
Thank you very much, Acting Associate Superintendent, Trustee Painter. Thanks for your patience. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Essentially the same question.
Fair enough. Any other business arising from the minutes, folks, before I move us on? Okay, so I'm going to move us on to A5. This is the community presentation portion of our agenda. We do have one presentation this evening under A5A regarding Junior Youth Empowerment Program. Peja Cezanne, and Peja, I'm sorry if I've not pronounced your name correctly. Please feel free to correct me. Did I get it right, or am I way off?
It's close, Pega.
Pega. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't really that close. You're being very generous. Thank you for being so kind. Welcome. We're really happy to have you here this evening. I don't know if anyone's explained the way that this process works, but I will endeavor to explain just so that you know what to expect. Is essentially presenters have 5 minutes. As board chair, one of my roles is to time the presentations. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. So again, apologize in advance for the interruption. I'm just interrupting to let you know you've got 1 minute. But otherwise, yeah, the floor is yours when you're ready. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you. Can I share that thing or the one I sent to you? Or was it you? Yeah.
It wouldn't have been me directly, but let me just look to staff. Yeah, Acting Associate Superintendent, did you have a slide deck or something that you could?
It's a
Pega, I just made you co-host. Are you able to share on your end?
Oh. Yes. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, I'll just scroll through because it's like a PDF. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So hi everyone. So nice to meet with you all virtually. I'm mindful there's only a few minutes, so I'll do my best to be concise. So yeah, my name is Pega. My pronouns are she and her, and my family came here as refugees, and I've been so blessed to experience many privileges of this land. And one of the privileges I have is working alongside students, primarily in middle school and high school, through the Junior Youth Empowerment Program, which I was inspired to present to you today. So what actually inspired me to reach out and present was I was attending a panel discussion on the crisis in youth mental health a few weeks ago here. And although we all know working together and we have so many different community organizations and different things, it's a good way to do things. But at that space, it became clear that the opportunities to do so are limited, primarily due to funding. Like things start and then they stop. And there's so many great preventative measures for young people to work through their challenges. So one of the things that I'm aware of that can be offered to support schools in Victoria and the young people who attend them is the Junior Youth Empowerment Program. And we've worked together in community and engaged many young people for years, but now there's been experience gained to be able to support schools and other organizations. And due to this experience and awareness of accounts all over the world claiming clear signs of helpful outcomes from the program, such as a sense of belonging, connection to oneself, and a great ability to learn and express one's thoughts and ideas, I thought it was timely to present this program to you guys and see what comes out of it. So the Junior Youth Program empowers young people to develop their sense of self while contributing to the betterment of their communities. And this is done by these aims, such as enhancing their ability to learn and express their thoughts and ideas, and putting and bringing their thoughts and ideas into fruition through service projects. And these photos that you'll see here, they're just all young people from, Greater Victoria, that have either been a part of the program as graduates of the program or youth mentors. So the program's inspiration actually comes in contrast to this idea that in society in general, people view this age group of middle schoolers as like problematic and lost. However, the Junior Youth Empowerment Program is consciously moving in the opposite direction by viewing young people as having a great capacity to not only contribute towards, but also improve their schools and communities. So some of what they do in the program is they discuss like fictional stories about young people from diverse circumstances to draw inspiration from them and explore concepts such as hope, justice, equality with the help of an older youth mentor. They're supported to explore questions unique to their stage of life and take part in cooperative activities to foster collective identity and true friendships. And they have opportunities to express themselves and their ideas creatively and artistically, as well as planning and carrying out service projects for their community. So the older youth mentor that kind of helps with the group is called an animator. And the animator is typically an older youth in high school. And I was thinking in this presentation, it's a great and effective way that we could potentially help bridge the gap between high school and middle school while supporting students with this transition. And then, like, as mentioned, service projects, this is actually like a very key component of the program. And this is something that really contributes to empowerment because it's a practical outcome of their ideas and thoughts. The idea with the service projects is that the junior youth, the middle schoolers themselves, they
Okay,
like
you have 1 minute left.
okay, thank you. They identify like a problem and then they kind of work together to address the problem. So there's some examples like service projects vary from like simple things like garbage cleanups to more complex things to kind of that have series of things like depending on how they build their capacity for that. So this is different teachers and counselors, parents. Yeah, and I'll just kind of wrap it up. Basically, there's 2 districts in Vancouver that have actually vetted the program and are offering it in schools. So, because I serve the program at a regional level, I'm happy to learn from them and see what it looks like to operationalize it in this context. And I've worked as an educational assistant in this district, and I've seen the same students who struggle to do any work or even attend school actually be dedicated and to learn and contribute to the betterment of their communities through the junior youth program. So yeah, I hope we can work together if possible. Happy to learn alongside you. Thank you.
Very much. If you wouldn't mind just, yeah, perfect. Wonderful. So one of the things that we do as well is just offer presenters the opportunity to take questions if they wish. You're not obliged to, but if you do wish, then I will open the floor to trustees who might have questions for you about your presentation. Would you like to take questions?
I can, I'm just out of breath. So fast.
Yeah, you did an amazing job getting through a lot of content very quickly. I feel very well informed in a short 5-minute presentation. No, take your time. You catch your breath, and I will, in the meantime, if you would like to take questions, I will open the floor up. But we're not in a rush, so feel free to take your time. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, okay, let's do it. Okay, so I see that a couple of my colleagues have questions. I'm going to start with Trustee Mobobi and then Trustee Kwan after that.
I think Trustee Kwan had her hand up before I did.
Thank you, Trustee Mobobi. Appreciate you helping me out. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
I'm not fussy, but sure, I won't waste time passing back and forth. But I think this is thank you for presenting. I think it's a wonderful program that you've brought to our attention. I have a number of questions, but I'm going to stick to, I think the most pressing one in my mind is, what would you see as next steps if this is something that the district is interested in pursuing? How would you see with, and how has this happened in other districts where you operationalize it, and what are next steps with moving towards that?
Yeah, I thought a little bit about this. So we have because we have young people that have gone through the program that are now trained as mentors. So one thing is we could kind of and some of those students are already in the schools and that kind of thing. So they themselves are already like ready, to kind of do the work. So it's not really anything, the resources are there. It's not super challenging in that regard. But in terms of vision, like I thought like we could even, if there's interested high school students that, really, there's the volunteer hours or they just want to give time and they can learn about this, then we could do that support and training and like accompaniment for them in that process to kind of connect to the middle school, like something like Spectrum and Colquitt or Spectrum and Glanford or Reynolds and Cedar Hill, like those ones that have those connections, like.
Thank you very much. Trustee Mabobi, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for presenting about this program, Pega. As some of my colleagues may know, I actually went through the junior youth program myself when I was between the ages of 12 and 14. And when I was 15, I also participated in the animator program, and I did that for a couple of years. And yeah, needless to say that the program is extremely effective. And one of the things that really comes to mind when I remember my time in the program is how there were no barriers to any kid attending, whether it was financial or social. And I guess I have two questions that sort of tie together. So the first is, could you expand a little bit on how the program contributes towards equity in the community, and stemming from that, sort of like the budgetary requirements of a program like this?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't have like a full, like a clear answer with the first part, but I have some examples. But so I know with equity, like because all like it's very low, like it's kind of like we don't, like the youth are volunteering. So it's not like they're not it's people are really doing this. It's very low budgetary. It's very low cost or no cost. Um but in terms of like equity, like because it's the youth are with a diverse group of people, like I have one example at a camp. They're consulting about service projects, but the group of youth, they're just from such diverse backgrounds. Like people they're reflecting on, they're thinking of their university and their goals and these things, and other people are just kind of happy to kind of be there and just, they're not thinking in that way. They're just thinking of more day-to-day survival, that kind of thing, because of their families. So I think it exposes young people to kind of be in a consultative process with others, in that regard. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a very clear answer for that. But
Thank you. No, it was a big question. So thank you for sharing your thoughts so candidly. We appreciate it. Any other questions or indeed comments for Pega before thank you, Cindy. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think a program like this is vital. I think that getting the youth involved in their community and having them feel connected is so important, especially in such positive ways that you were talking about. So I'm just wondering, this isn't in every school, like every middle school or anything. It's just centered in an area. Is that correct? How do you see that expanding into the middle schools?
yeah, so essentially connecting with you guys and kind of exploring those options. Like I know in some schools it's happened because just like the young people themselves did a little club, or like a teacher wanted to sponsor them to do it. So it's been really grassroots, and that's kind of the way we're going, just to learn, gain experience at the grassroots neighborhood level. Yeah, I myself started when I was a youth. I was like, I heard about, I was inspired, me and other youth just kind of engaged young people in our neighborhood and kind of worked through it. And then so yeah, so just kind of collaborating. The purpose of this presentation is to find opportunities to connect with the middle schools in particular.
Okay, thank you.
Nissa, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, and through the chair, thank you, Pega, for your presentation. Given the importance of embracing the enthusiasm when starting up a new program in a new area, I was wondering if you could share any stories about like sort of lessons learned as far as places to start or things that maybe didn't seem to be a barrier just from an administrative or an institutional standpoint when I mean, because our young people can be so creative with their ideas about what they'd like to do and how they'd like to contribute in their school communities and more broadly. And sometimes because of their enthusiasm and their youth, they can run up against barriers as to what is possible. And I was wondering if you could speak to if that had been encountered in the program or how that might be handled so that kind of steer the enthusiasm and avoid the disappointment that sometimes can come from dreaming really big, because I know that we all do when we're young.
Yeah, no, and because the older youth are the ones kind of helping guide the younger youth, they're all youth still, so that enthusiasm is there. And I think a lot of times it's actually part of the component in like preparing, and especially with service projects, is like kind of trying to do like a short-term service project first. So that's like the role of the older youth to help them kind of plan something that they can do like that week or the following week. Even like garbage cleanup, like something that's relatively simple. And then as their capacity, I think that was one of the times my breath was running out. I was trying to read that one. But yeah, as their capacity increases for service, then more complex ones can be undertaken. So then, yeah, because a lot of times they're like, oh, let's go build a school or let's go to this place, and they want to travel somewhere else, to do something, so then you kind of think, okay, what can we do? So that's the role of the older youth, and like kind of helping them see the opportunities in their surroundings, like at their school, in their street, like what's something they can do this week.
Thank you very much for both the question and the answer. No, sounds very exciting. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here to make us aware that this program exists. And yeah, we appreciate it. Are you happy for us to reach out to you via email?
Yep, that works. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Take care. Thanks again for being here. Good night. Okay, folks, that brings us to our correspondence section of our agenda. We have one piece of correspondence under B1. This is a letter from the GVTA Climate Justice Committee in relation to the climate plan. It is there for you to review. Trustees, did you want to pull the letter for discussion? Okay, I will certainly, just so that you know, endeavor to, once we've got a committee up and running, we're going to discuss that, the ad hoc committee that we're looking to establish for the purposes of looking at the implementation of our climate action plan and the associated act regs and other climate related obligations that we have as a school district. I think that'll be a good opportunity for us to engage in some of the points that they've highlighted in their letter to us. So yeah, if we're not going to pull it, then I would just commit to having a dialogue, an informal dialogue in relation to that committee and the work that committee is going to get started on behalf of our district. Okay, that leads us into the next item, which is the board chair's report. My report is there for your information. There is a couple of items I want to highlight. One, I want to acknowledge that on the 21st of this month is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And again, this is an opportunity for us to both recognize and celebrate the history, heritage, resilience, and diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis across Canada. If there are any events in Victoria or indeed through your schools, please do take advantage of those. It's an excellent opportunity to learn, to grow, and to benefit from learning more about the rich and diverse cultures. I also wanted to highlight under information and resources that the BC Civil Liberties Association has made available a number of publications to educate and empower youth about their rights. These are free resources. One is entitled Know Your Rights, Police Interactions at School, Pocket Guide to Your Rights, Digital Rights for Youth. And then there's another publication around complaints regarding police or peace officers. All of those various publications can be accessed on the BC Civil Liberties Association website via the links in the report. And then just a quick reminder for folks, we are about to talk about our ad hoc committee reports. That's the next on our agenda. But also, again, if anyone is interested in learning more about the board's SPLO decision, there's links again to our latest statement and our FAQ. All right, without further ado, I want to open the floor up to any questions folks might have in relation to my report this month. All right, I don't see any, so I'm going to move us along. Next, we do have, as I mentioned, our advocacy ad hoc representative reports. These are annual reports that trustees that are assigned to ad hoc committees put together to report their activities on behalf of the board each year. We do have a few reports. I'm going to just open the floor to my colleagues who have reports in the agenda if there's anything that they wish to highlight from their report. The first report under C2A is the Advocacy Ad Hoc Committee report. Trustee Bayo represents the board on that ad hoc committee. Trustee Bayo, is there anything from your report that you would like to highlight?
Not really. It's a pretty short report.
Fair enough. It's there for information. Thank you, Trustee Bayo. And equally, in relation to the French Ad Hoc Committee report, is there anything there that you want to highlight, or is it just there for information, which we appreciate?
It's there for information.
Thank you very much. Our next report on our agenda this evening is the Equity Ad Hoc Committee report. We have two trustees assigned to this committee, Trustee Mabobi and Trustee David. Trustee Mabobi has done the report on behalf of the board. So Trustee Mabobi, is there anything from your report that you want to highlight?
Thank you, Chair. There is only one point on our report. It is that we amended the terms of reference. So our committee will be meeting significantly more often in the next year. It's an exciting development and we're all looking forward to it very much. That's it.
Thank you very much. Around that report, we're really excited to hear that there's enthusiasm to meet more frequently, and the work that your committee is going to do is really, really important. So thank you both for offering your time. With that particular committee, with the terms of reference, if the committee gets to the point of wanting to amend their terms of reference, and they have some recommendations for how that would look moving forward, then please do bring those to the board. The board approves all of our terms of reference. So perhaps maybe I would suggest at your next committee meeting or whenever you do have some recommendations for the board in relations to amendments to your terms of reference, we can then plan to add that into the relevant month's board agenda.
Thank you, Chair. I expect that to be in September.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have at C, the George Day School Naming Ad Hoc Committee, and Trustee Painter is the board representative on that committee. Trustee Painter, is there anything that you want to highlight?
Apart from the draft watermark that shouldn't be there, I personally would make a recommendation that I think it would be valuable for board leadership to reach out to the Songhees and Esquimalt communities, to their leadership, to determine interests and approach going forward on this one.
Trustee Painter, did you want to move a motion for the board's consideration from the floor, or is that something you intend to bring to the board at a later date?
No, certainly I'll happy to move that the board direct the chair to engage with the elected leadership of Songhees and Esquimalt nations to determine their interests in working on George J. renaming committee or initiative more broadly. Skip the committee.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Trustee Kwan. I just want to quickly turn to staff just to make sure that we don't move too fast, just to make sure we've captured the wording of the proposed motion before we move into discussion. Are we okay with the wording?
Through the chair, if it's possible to repeat it, that would be helpful.
Yeah, certainly. Trustee Painter, would you mind just repeating the motion?
Okay, I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. That the board direct the chair of SD 61 Greater Victoria to engage directly with elected leadership of Songhees and Esquimalt Nation to determine their interest in the George J. renaming initiative.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. I'll just give staff a minute just to note that down. Okay, if we're ready, then I'll move us in. So we have a mover, Trustee Painter, a seconder, Trustee Kwan. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed and abstentions? All right, so that's the balance of the board in favor and Trustee David abstaining. Thank you very much, folks. All right, we are at trustee reports. We've already had some. I don't believe we have any verbal reports on our agenda this evening, in addition to the ad hoc committee reports. So I'll move us into D, which is our board committee reports. The first one under D1 is the Education Policy and Directions Committee. You'll see there that there are no recommended motions this month. However, there is a draft set of minutes for information only. Under D2, we have our Operations Policy and Planning Committee. We have a number of recommended motions. Under A, again, you'll see the draft minutes for information only. In terms of the recommended motions from the June 10th, 2024 meeting, the first recommended motion is that the Board of Education of School District number 61 Greater Victoria approve the 5 amendments to the draft Climate Action Plan Implementation Ad Hoc Committee terms of reference. So I would suggest that we start there and then we move through the recommended motions in order, subject to my colleagues' feedback. So we have the revised draft. I'm just going to direct everybody to that in our packet. And there's both a memo as well as the tracked changes that were made, and then a clean copy. I wonder if we could look briefly at the clean copy. I think there's just a couple of housekeeping items still just to mop up. So the clean copy starts on page 45 of the packet. The first line under purpose. So it reads right now, the Climate Action Plan Implementation Ad Hoc Board Committee is an ad hoc committee established by the board. I suggest we just get rid of the word board. And we then later in the sentence say it's a board committee. So it's an ad hoc committee established by the board for the purpose of reviewing, et cetera, et cetera. So just cleaning up the language, making it a little clearer. So it would read, the Climate Action Plan Implementation Ad Hoc Committee is an ad hoc committee established by the board for the purposes of, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just going to pause for a moment just to, again, allow our staff to get to that point. Okay. And then the other amendments I would suggest we consider tonight is just reordering the deliverables. And so my recommendation would just be to put the long range facilities plan last as the last bulleted item. And so we start with the accountability report, which stems from our legislative requirement, then the plans being the climate action plan, and then the long range facilities plan. So just a reordering. And then finally at under voting, so just a capitalization thing, again, just a housekeeping item. So the first, committee needs to be capitalized and then a full stop after education. And that's again, just under voting, that bulleted sentence there. So there'd be a capital on a committee and then a full stop after education. So those are the amendments I would suggest that we consider. Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if it's possible to add a slight amendment under purpose where we have in the fourth line, made towards meeting our GHG emission reduction targets. We don't say anywhere what GHG is. It's greenhouse gas,
Good
but
catch.
it's just launching straight into an acronym.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks for catching that. So we're gonna spell out GHG and then we can use it later if we want to as an acronym. Excellent. Thank you for catching that. I think the only other thing that we discussed, but I don't know if trustees since our operations meeting had an opportunity to think further about it, but we did talk about the number of student reps on the committee. We left it at 2 at the committee, but I know we were thinking about whether we want to increase the number. We did add the word "and" so that there's multiple points of opportunity to gather student input. So we said 2 student representatives and feedback from the student representative advisory. So that does open up for a further avenue to glean student input. But did trustees have any further thoughts about the number of student reps invited to this committee? Yeah, Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
I wonder if encompassing that, I mean, you know, we're all busy and students are just as busy. I'm sure their parents would agree their schoolwork comes first. But if we put something where it was at least 2, so it is open to more if more are interested in attending, and just adding the words "at least" at the front of that, that's a thought.
Yeah, thanks. That's a pragmatic approach. And I think too, it also gives the option of having alternates. So I know sometimes if students have other competing priorities, it's not that they don't want to attend, it's just they've got a competing priority, and it would be great to be able to send alternates to give other students opportunities. Yeah, so I like that idea. What do folks think? Do we want to move the amendments as a group once we've determined how we want to proceed in terms of the number of student reps, or should we unpack those 2 issues, look to make some amendments in stages? So Trustee Khan, are you happy to add? I'm seeing no sort of dissenting views, so I'm going to read that as some consensus is forming. So are we happy to then add to the list of amendments the word "at least" 2 student representatives to that last? Okay, so then I'm going to be looking for a mover then and a seconder in a moment, unless there's any other housekeeping items or amendments we need to make tonight. And then, okay, thank you, Trustee Painter. Did you have an amendment or are you just moving it?
Sorry, I do have another amendment, but I was going to wait until the ones on the table had been addressed. That's acceptable.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so may I have a mover? Thank you, Trustee Kwan, seconded by Trustee Gagnon. Any discussion in relation to the suite of amendments? And before I call the question or look to discussion, I want to first turn to staff to make sure you've captured everything. And if you have any questions, we can address those now. We're good? Okay. We're good? Okay. And then before I call the question, I want to just pause because I'm getting ahead of myself and just look to our partners if you have any thoughts or comments in relation to the motion on the floor. Okay. All right, so thank you, trustees. Any debate, any discussion around the suggested suite of amendments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the suite of amendments? And that is unanimous. Okay. Okay, so we have a terms of reference that has been amended. Trustee Painter, did you want to present a further amendment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it's a little bit messy, but my recommendation would be to, under membership, strike the second last bullet referring to one representative of indigenous ancestry. Strike that entirely and replace it with a new section titled Indigenous Engagement. And I'll send this by message, but I'll read it out for everyone who doesn't have access to the chat. The superintendent will engage with representatives of the four houses to determine whether each wish to be engaged with the committee's work, and if so, how, in brackets. Examples, direct involvement in committee meetings, comma, receive and provide comments on meeting agendas and meeting summaries, comma, other. And that has been shared and will go out to everyone who has access to chat shortly. If I can provide my rationale.
Hold on, Trustee Peter, would you mind just waiting just one moment? I'm going to put it in the chat and then I'll look for a seconder and then I'll come back to you. I don't see it in chat.
I've sent it to Secretary, Treasurer, Superintendent, and Associate.
Ah, I see. Okay. Oh, there we go. It's there now. Okay. All right. I'm just going to give folks just a minute to read it. Okay. Just looking to colleagues, if there is a seconder to open the floor for discussion. Trustee David, thank you. Okay, so moved by Trustee Painter, seconded by Trustee David. Trustee Painter, go ahead and motivate.
Yeah, and my apologies, I can't spell wish for some reason. I've been thinking about our board's general approach to consultation with the four houses, and recognize that we need to, even though in spirit we're already there, in practical terms, including First Nations representatives as just another of our partner groups to be involved in a committee doesn't really strike me as moving towards reconciliation. And also the idea of one representative from four houses defeats the purpose of the four houses in my mind. At the same time, I'm mindful that the four houses have limited capacity to engage. The idea that an individual could come to every one of our different ad hoc committee meetings that we have over the course of the year is just unrealistic. So with that in mind, I believe we need to have flexibility in how we seek to engage with First Nations and other Indigenous communities, but we also need to do it on their terms. So the idea would be that rather than simply assign them a chair and hope that someone shows up, that we proactively ask them whether or not this is a topic of interest to them, and if so, what their capacities are and what their interests are in terms of how they engage with us on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. Trustee David, as the seconder, you're welcome to motivate if you have any thoughts in relation to this motion that you would like to share. All right, thank you. So I'm going to open the floor first to our partners and then to other trustees. Okay, trustees, do you have any thoughts? There was a couple of just drafting things that perhaps we can just sort of address first before we get into debate. And my suggestion would be that we just use the word for rather than the number for. And then after the word, well, obviously we just, again, that we correctly spell wish, obviously, and then to engage with the committee's work and rather than to be engaged. So just getting rid of the word be. And then I think instead of a full stop after work, it would just be a comma. And yeah, was there anything else that we just want to quickly just do a little drafting cleanup? I know it's difficult when you're copying pasting quickly into the chat. I think that was everything. Trustee Painter, would you be happy with those sort of just drafting cleanup items?
With apologies and thanks, yes.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so if the board, subject to the board's direction, I'm going to move us into debate. And I want to just, before I do, turn to staff to make sure they got those. So we're just correcting the word, it would be the word for rather than the number for. And then we would get rid of the word, what we'd correctly spell wish. After wish, it would just be to engage. So we'd get rid of the word be. And then after the words committee's work would be a comma. And then I think that was everything. Thank you. We've got a new, folks, you can look in the chat. We've got just an updated clean draft with those corrections. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so we've got that for our review. Trustees, I'm just going to be turning to you for any discussion. Let me know. Okay, so subject to, I guess I will put myself on the speakers list then. So yeah, I appreciate this coming forward. I think it's a really, good idea to look at sort of the standard way that we engage through our committee structure. Our rights holders that around our table. I think it's a very, practical way to make sure that every time we sit down through our own governance structure, we're thinking about and proactively reaching out to ask how each of the four houses would like to be engaged or if they would like to be engaged. So I really appreciate the thought, and I certainly think that this is a very practical way of setting us down that path. So thank you. Is there any other discussion or thoughts anybody would like to share before I call the question? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment? And that is unanimous. Okay. So we have an amended draft. Now, one of the things we did not think about when we did that work at OPS was that the goal, of course, tonight is to approve, to get to the point where we're happy with all the amendments and then to approve the terms of reference. And so I'm wondering if anybody wants to just to bring a motion from the floor to approve the terms of reference as amended. Wonderful. Thank you, Trustee Bio, seconded by Trustee Guan. Any discussion? And I'm sorry, our partners, if you have any thoughts about us going ahead then and approving this amended terms of reference, please feel free to share those with us. I will slow myself down again. Okay, wonderful, thanks. All right, trustees, any discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor with a show of hands. And again, this is to approve the amended terms of reference, and that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees, and thanks everybody for helping us get there. Appreciate everybody's contributions. Okay, so we are now moving on to our next recommended motion coming from OPS. The next recommended motion is that the Board of Education of School District Number 61, Greater Victoria, approve the proposed 5-year capital plan, major capital programs for 2025-26, as provided on the 5-year capital plan summary for 2025-2026, submitted to the Ministry of Education and Childcare. All right, trustees, may I have a mover? Thank you, Trustee Gagnon, and a seconder. Thank you, Trustee Mbobi. Okay, so before we get into our discussion, I wanted to circle back again to our partners just to see if they had any comments or thoughts they would like us to consider before we enter into our discussion. Okay, trustees, any other thoughts in relation to this, the major capital plan element of our 5-year capital planning? Yeah, Trustee Painter, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just mindful of our last piece of business. For future capital plans, annual facility plans, anything that where we're looking at proposing construction or facilities maintenance, I would recommend that in the future, against each specific initiative, we identify what our projected greenhouse gas savings are. For example, installing DDCs, becoming more efficient with more efficient boilers, anything else that when it comes time to present that recommendation to the board for consideration, even if it's not required in the ministry form, that we get it in ours. I think that it's useful information, but more importantly, I think it would help to support the mindset that everything that we do around our facilities has to have a climate action lens on it. It might not be the only deciding factor, but it needs to be a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. Yeah, no, I certainly like that idea. You know, another option, I've seen boards do this in relation to budgets, is put together a needs budget. And so we could look to moving towards that kind of approach in future, where we have our capital plan, what we're submitting, and then we have what we would actually need. And likewise, what we would need in order to fully utilize the opportunities to reduce our emissions. So for instance, electrifying rather than going with a more efficient gas alternative would be a perfect case in point of where we might say, look, we know it's more expensive, but look at these other cost savings down the road, or look at these emission reductions and the lost opportunity costs associated with not upgrading the infrastructure now. So yeah, there definitely is some opportunities there. I wonder, staff around the table tonight, if you have any thoughts on our approach here and how we might interweave some advocacy with our submissions to the ministry around our capital projects requests.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My only comment is that I know often the ministry will only fund us for the lowest cost option. So when we're looking at that, just being mindful of the variances, like you say, identify the shortfalls of the capital funding that we're receiving, and that could be an advocacy route for us to just continue to remind the ministry that we would love to be able to do more to have positive impact on the climate should we receive additional funding. And I know that's always an issue for the ministry as well, and how to divvy out their budget, but, I think we're generally looking at those options when we're looking at what is feasible anyway, so it wouldn't necessarily be a huge amount of work for us to do that.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the confirmation that in general terms, you tend to already have the information available. That's really useful for us. We're not looking to create more work for you folks. Okay. All right, so this is some good discussion in terms of what we might look to do moving forward. In terms of tonight, we've got our major capital plan requests under this item that fall within the umbrella of this particular motion. Any further discussion in relation to those items? And again, we do have some things on there that we would ideally like to be spending a little more and doing more, especially around our GHG reductions. And there's no doubt about that. Any questions that folks have about the plan before I call the question? All right. Hearing none, I am going to call the question. All those in favor with a show of hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, so the next motion for consideration tonight is that the Board of Education of School District Number 61, Greater Victoria, approve the proposed 5-year capital plan, minor capital programs for 2025-2026, as provided on the 5-year capital plan summary for 2025-2026, submitted to the Ministry of Education and Childcare. And again, may I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Trustee Mbowe, and seconded by Trustee Gagnon. Partners around the table tonight, do you have any thoughts around minor capital that you would like the board to consider before we deliberate? Okay. All right, trustees. Any thoughts, any discussion before I call the question around minor capital? I think the same discussion kind of applies here too. Okay, all those in favor with a show of hands. And that is unanimous. All right, so we now are moving into E, our district leadership team reports. The first report is the superintendent's report. Superintendent, did you want to highlight anything from your monthly report under A?
Two areas I would like to highlight. First is 3 acknowledgements with gratitude. So for the organizers of the Indigenous graduation ceremonies, it was an honor to have been invited and to have participated in the celebrations. Also of note, like to thank very much Jane Massey for her service as the president of CUPE 947. She is heading into retirement, so we wish her a long, healthy, and happy retirement. And also Ilda Turcott, who has been the president of GVTA, is stepping down from that role, not retiring, but stepping down from the role. So just want to extend gratitude there. And also congratulations to the graduates of 2024. Many of us have been participating in the grad ceremonies, always a highlight of a year, and want to wish them well as they move forward in their pathways. And to all the retirees for the district, thank you very much for your dedication towards student and learning within the district. Lastly, if I may, also want to point out our end of the year summary, which is being shared by departments. It provides highlights and ongoing work, and I won't go through each of the slides, but it is there for information.
Thank you, Superintendent Whitten. All right, folks, do we have any questions in relation to the superintendent's report for this month? Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we'd just reiterate the gratitude that the superintendent has at the end of her report. Thank you so much for putting that in there, and add my own congratulations to everyone there, as well as a thank you to President Massey and President Turcott for their work this year. It's been invaluable and appreciated. I do have a question. There is a question at the end of that. I was actually just curious. I see the all superintendent Zoom meeting there on June 7th, and just wondered if there was any curiosity as to whether there was any emerging, I guess, topics or trends that were happening that you could share with us.
Oh, Superintendent, sorry, you're muted.
Thank you. Good. Okay.
You're
Thank
good.
you, Trustee. One, just go back in thinking of what was covered in that meeting. I believe it was with regards to the plans in place for the event of any emergencies throughout the province, including floods and where we're at with snowpacks and fires, and just to ensure that families in our district know what is available through websites and ongoing communication.
Thank you, Superintendent. Trustees, any other questions? We do have a recommended motion that we receive the superintendent's report as presented. If there are no other questions, I will call for a mover. Thank you, Trustee Kwan, and a seconder. Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor with a show of hands, and this is just to receive the superintendent's report. Perfect, and that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Next, under B is the 2025, 2026, and 2026-2027 school calendar. There is a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, approves the following 2025, 2026, and 2026-2027 school calendars. This again has come back from going out for a period of engagement and has been posted on our website. Superintendent, is there anything that you wanted to highlight from this particular item?
And make sure the unmute works.
Yes, we can hear you.
Nothing specific other than it, yes, as you have mentioned, it's gone out for the feedback, and it is there for approval.
Thank you very much. All right, before I look for a mover or seconder, do the partners around the table this evening have any comments regarding the calendars? Okay, all right, trustees, I'm going to look to you for a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Trustee Kwan, seconded by Trustee Gagnon. Any discussion? Trustee Kwan, did you? Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to the 2026-2027 academic calendar, with the school opening date being Tuesday, September 8th compared to Tuesday, September 2nd, the year prior, it looks like there's approximately a week less of academic time in that calendar. And I'm wondering how that came to be and if there's still a balance somewhere in there in terms of teaching days, because it seems like there's a week less.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. We do have years that are shorter and years that are longer, and over years that balances. It is contractual that we come back the first Tuesday after Labor Day and that we finish the last Friday in the month. So sometimes that means an early finish, and sometimes that means, like this year, that we go right almost to the end of the month.
Thank you, Superintendent. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just curious. I know we post this on our website for feedback, and I just wondered if we had received any feedback at all.
I believe we received one piece of feedback, and that feedback wasn't able to be embedded in this calendar.
Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, Trustee Kwan, for the question. Okay, so any other questions in relation to the calendars for the next 2 school years? All right, hearing none. All those in favor with a show of hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is redundant. Thank you, Superintendent, for providing us a placeholder. We mopped it up earlier, but thank you. And so that leads us to D. This is the personal digital device restrictions in schools, the revised code of conduct item. Superintendent, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, through the chair. So we did revisit this in May 27th. We have gone out for feedback. Each of the schools spoke with students, staff, and parents. We received feedback from all levels. Feedback was received right up to today, so some of that was embedded. You will see within the memo the current language for elementary, middle, and secondary. Some areas to note that we did make changes. We had received feedback around moving the accommodation statement up further into the code of conduct. We also received feedback around the inclusion of more than one teacher. So there's teachers at the end of the second paragraph. We received feedback around switching the purposes of instruction and promoting digital literacy. We flipped that around. And the fact also that the students in many situations are not able to give consent. So we moved that to include consent from a parent or a caregiver. One of the areas, though, that I think we have received feedback, as I mentioned up into today, was around separating the bullets with regards to photos, videos, or audio recordings. It is, when it's in one paragraph, it looks like it aligns with the same statement that the use of personal digital devices outside of instructional hours is not permitted, and then we're saying no photos. So we would probably look to make the change to separate the two sentences. Some of the other feedback sort of was varied. Some wanted more autonomy and some wanted less autonomy. Some wanted it very clearly spelled out with regards to where the device would be stored. Some of that, I think, is up to the school. What we've tried to do with each of these statements is make it align with the ministerial order to include all of the requirements by that, as well as where we feel we need to go as a standardized approach. But when it gets to how will it be dealt with within the school, that does come within the provincial standards for codes of conduct, where the response needs to be restorative in nature and escalating as far as student age. So it was a fine balance between being overly prescriptive and ensuring that we did align with the order of the minister.
Thank you, Superintendent. I think what I'll do now then is open the floor to questions, comments, and some discussion. First, I'm going to turn to our partners here tonight. If you had any comments on where we've landed with the current version of the draft. Yeah, Anissa, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan, and through the chair. This is, as you can imagine, potentially a hot topic among parents. And having been privy to several discussions, it definitely seems to be quite divisive. So I appreciate the balance that has been struck here between being overly prescriptive and still allowing for opportunities where devices can be used to support learning. I'm hoping, I guess the thing going forward is there an opportunity to revisit this after it's been implemented, to revise once it's been in place for a certain period of time? Is there some thought to that? Just because I think the proof of this pudding will be in the eating.
Very well put. Yes, indeed. Got a strong visual image as a result of that last phrase. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I was going to suggest to my colleagues that we potentially move a motion to, provide some direction around a review and just build it into our work in the next year. Because yeah, this is another area where it's new, and we do the best we can within a relatively short period of time to adapt to those new directions. But indeed, the proof will be in the pudding. Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna move us. Oh, sorry, Superintendent. Please
Sorry,
stop
if I
me if I
may.
don't notice you. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
If I may, within the provincial standards for codes of conduct, there is a requirement that they are reviewed annually with employees, parents, and students. So this being embedded into codes of conduct, this would be all inclusive in that annual review. And we typically do that early spring, so that when we're moving forward with the written documents that need to be available at the school level, it's done in advance, so those can be prepared for the September. So we would anticipate the regular review happening probably no later than March, so that any wording changes can go forward. And this is done, should be done at every school with all staff, students and employees.
Thank you, Superintendent. I think what I had envisioned was a review that included the board. So there's sort of like what the schools do and or should be doing every year, and then there's the board having some discussion at the board table with our partner groups around the board table. And I think especially with this, because at the end of the day, that the board needs to be satisfied that the code of conducts, the standardized wording is working well. And if we want to see a change, then we need to have an avenue to have a discussion and then give that direction. So perhaps we can look to some kind of an annual review following the built-in school-based review that should be happening every year with codes of conduct. But Superintendent would be interested to hear what you think in terms of timing of it coming back to the board for review.
Thank you. I would recommend that this is reviewed at the school level, as I say, probably right around or just after spring break. And then it comes back to the board toward the end of March or early April. I think that, I think in particular, this language, it will be very important that people review it, because as it's written, may be different than as it's implemented or it's operationalized.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, 100% agree. Thank you. That gives us an idea of what we should be shooting for. Okay, I want to again open the floor for discussion. If any of our other partners around the table want to make any comments or have any questions in relation to where we've landed on the draft. There are a couple items, and I just had a queries about and wanted to sort of see why we had landed in the way we had. One was, again, just coming back to the matter of including headphones in the definition of personal digital device. It doesn't appear in the definition in the order. So I'm just wondering, why we still have headphones in there. And I could just imagine I can imagine things, that being potentially difficult. And if we are going to put it in, and there's a reason why we have, perhaps we want to unpack it or not include it in the definition of personal digital device. Go ahead.
The respond? Okay. Thank you. So the intent of putting it in there is probably twofold. One is that it's very difficult to listen to anything through your earbuds or headphones without it being connected to a digital device. So if students have them on or in their ears, it's going to reflect the fact that they're listening to something, and therefore they're quite likely their phone, if that's it, is not on airplane mode and it's not, it's connected. So that's one, is just to surface that if they are. It's also, I think, again, up to the teacher of the classroom to determine whether they are wanting for their students to be listening to music or have a requirement for headphones. And so there's a dialogue that can occur at the class level with the teacher around why they would or would not wish for students to be connected. I think when we're looking for, part of this is to provide for a restricted piece or focused learning time. This would be part of that it would potentially provide for more focused learning time by not being plugged into something.
Thank you, Superintendent. Trustee Kwan.
So a couple of things, actually, if I might follow up on that thread a minute. I understand where it's coming from. Absolutely. Don't necessarily disagree. I think in my mind, I'm thinking, I know that headphones are used. So I guess it's around instructional time and how that's actually, how that's defined. I know for ADHD specifically, headphones are actually more effective for focus time when it's actual working time rather than listening to the teacher. Obviously, if the teacher's teaching, you wouldn't want anything in someone's ears, but I do know for some disabilities, whether they're actually designated or not, that kind of thing is actually more effective for focus time than and actually increases the ability to learn rather than takes away. So in that sense, I guess and I think it will come out as this is operationalized and as we see what the new code of conduct comes out next year. So it would be interesting though to kind of see how we would look at that and how teachers would look at that. And if I might be a little bit cheeky here, Chair, and go with my second comment too, was just around when I was looking at the provincial standards for codes of conduct. Thank you for putting that in the packet as well so we could see it. I just was looking at number 6 under D and E and looking more around consequences and unacceptable behavior. And then also the reasonable steps to prevent retaliation by a person against a student who has made a complaint. And I just wondered if perhaps it's already included in other parts of code of conduct of schools, but just wanted to kind of highlight that and see how that relates to this new part of our code of conduct.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Superintendent, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. It's a great point. That should be when we review all of the codes of conduct that come in, we look for that language. It would be relevant for everything that came forward with regards to that school's code. And so we were specific not to add that because this now becomes part of the entire school code of conduct. This is different in that it's consistent language, and different schools have different other parts of their codes, but it is an expectation that there is language in there that is very clear what the consequences are for unacceptable behavior, and that also that there is no retaliation, or that we have reasonable steps in place to prevent retaliation.
Trustee Kwan, thank you, Superintendent. Trustee Bio, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of continue the thing about headphones. I know personally, like, a big reason why you might want students to have their own headphones is because the classrooms might not have enough to plug into like even the school devices. And then if you're doing something like Duolingo or some games or activities that you need sound, it's like most kids are using their own earphones. But also I think about middle school, and I think this is covered, like I think we were saying, like, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that this would be at teachers' discretion, but during that work time, especially in middle and high school, when you potentially have like 60 to 90 minutes of like solid 20 people sitting in a room silently working, at university, everyone in the library has earphones, like everybody's listening to music. And different kinds of music. I think it's not just kids with ADHD, like who necessarily would benefit from listening to something. I think being in a room silently is really hard for most people. So I'm getting a teaching call. Yeah, but I assume that would be at the teacher's discretion.
Thank you, Trustee Bio. Superintendent, did you want to clarify sort of what the intention was? I mean, I think at the minimum, we want to make sure that it's not conflated with it being a personal digital device, because it isn't. But what are your thoughts, Superintendent, around being a little more descriptive about what we're trying to achieve here? Because I think Trustee Bio's comments are very well made. And as our Trustee Kwan's, that it isn't just students with designations who benefit from being able to use headphones to help them focus when they're doing their coursework.
So thank you. Two points. One, we did specifically remove the language that said it was a personal digital device. So we separated out and just put that earbuds and headphones connected to personal digital devices are also restricted. So we did intentionally change that language. I think, again, when it comes to the use of any of these pieces, it is at the discretion of the teacher. And so that was the intention, is that the teacher can make that accommodation should they wish. We also do recognize that there are students certainly that within their sport plan, IEP, or any other agreed upon plan may wish and benefit from use of a headphone or music or whatever they're using it for.
Trustee Painter, thanks for your patience. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Shifting gears, my thought was around the idea of student versus parent / caregiver consent. And I believe this may be an area where additional direction or guidance will be required, simply to be able to identify at what age or capacity students are able to give consent. There's this entire issue of consent, especially around digital imagery, et cetera, is a very fast developing area of law and law enforcement. So I think that it would be really useful to provide some consistent guidance on how we're going to interpret that and what the implications are. I don't think that's one that we should sort of leave to random chance.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. Superintendent, did you have any comments in relation to Trustee Painter's point?
Not specifically. I think that is a great point. I think that when we're talking about the implementation of this code of conduct, we would want to be clear with everyone what is the age of consent and how we would monitor that, or how schools would monitor that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just gonna circle back around for any further comments. I know I had one more just in at the secondary level. At the very end of the revised version, it speaks to students using phones in the office to contact parents or guardians at the secondary level, even outside of instructional time. And I'm wondering why we haven't differentiated between what we might expect at elementary or perhaps middle, as opposed to secondary students. I'm not sure how we would expect anyone to enforce, or why we would want to enforce or limit secondary students' ability outside of instructional time to use their phone to contact their parent or guardian. So I just wondered if we could sort of unpack that a little bit, what the thinking was there. That would be helpful.
Yeah, some of the feedback before we had this statement was just to ensure that people knew that even if they didn't have a phone, they could use the school office phone, or if they had it and it was off in a way that they could still access it. It wasn't meant to suggest that secondary students outside of instructional hours couldn't use their own phone to call. It was just that there always will be an office phone available for parents to connect with students, or students to connect with parents.
Got it. I perhaps we can look at the wording there just to clarify that. That is not what I took away. I don't know if other people read it and took something different away than I did, but I took it away. I looked at the sentence and thought, oh, okay, there's a restriction. We're saying secondary students can't use their own devices to call their parent and guardians outside of instructional time. So if that's not the intention, perhaps we could look at that wording. Any other thoughts, feedback to assist the superintendent to finalize a draft? Again, it's a fairly short runway, so we've got, I believe superintendent, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the draft is literally due to the ministry by the end of this month, like 1st of July or so. Yeah, so we don't have a lot of time, and so I think it's really great to have a built-in review at this table, so that both the board and the partners around the table can come back in light of the operational experience in the start of the new school year, just to reflect and see if there's any further changes we need to make. So in light of that, I am going to look to my colleagues. I'm going to suggest that we move a motion just to make sure we put a placeholder in our calendar for perhaps maybe we want to say following the school-based annual review of the code of conducts. The superintendent will bring back the draft to the board with a report on how implementation has gone throughout the year. Something like that. Again, at your discretion, but I do think we need to give some direction and make sure it comes back at that time. And if you agree, I will look for a mover. Trustee Kwan and a seconder. Trustee Bio. Okay, so let's just make sure we're clear on the wording. Does anybody have a more succinct way to achieve that? I felt like mine was a little wordy. Perhaps we can do better and be more succinct. Go ahead, Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, I think that the board direct the superintendent to bring feedback to the board after reviewing the code of conduct with schools, district schools or
School district schools, yeah. Superintendent, will that give you sufficient direction in terms of knowing when that we expect that to come back? Okay. So it'll be following the annual review by schools. Okay, thank you very much. Any discussion or thoughts from our partners around the table tonight in relation to the proposed motion? Okay. Trustees, any discussion? Right. Seeing none, all those in favor with a show of hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. All right, thank you very much, Superintendent, for bringing that item back and working to quite a tight deadline. We appreciate it. Our next item on our agenda this evening is under E. This is the Public Interest Disclosure Act. It's the annual report for our school district from the fiscal year 2024. Superintendent Whitten, I believe, is this our first annual report? Yeah, wonderful. Our very first inaugural report. So I will turn it over to you when you're ready.
Thank you. As required by the Public Interest Disclosure Act, we are reporting. This will be sent in and it is there for information.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Did you in the end up getting like a template to use, or do we have to create our own template?
The template that you have, we borrowed from other templates.
Wonderful. Well, that's always nice when we can borrow a template. Okay, so trustees and partners around the table, our inaugural report is there. Do we have any questions around that? So I noticed that we did have one that came forward this year and that there was no investigation. I'm just wondering if there is anything that can be shared as that in the public meeting in relation to why an investigation wasn't carried out.
The follow-up with the individual was clear that it was not needing an investigation. It was closed as a result. I think other measures were put in place.
Okay. Yeah, and if there's any trustees, if there's any questions you have that would best be broached in camera, then I would just say, let's be cautious. And if you're not sure, then let's talk about that and make sure that it's that any questions you have are coming to the right meeting. Thank you very much, Superintendent. Just one final round of opportunity if anyone does have any questions before I move this on. Okay, our next item is under F, and this is our elementary strings hub model update. Superintendent, I will turn the floor over to you. I don't know if you're going to provide the update or someone else, but the floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. This is a follow-up from the information that was provided in May. There was a request to provide a little more information with regards to students traveling safely between and within hubs. So some recommendations for these situations, Associate Superintendent Arts looked at. He investigated or looked at all of the travel routes, and just as some examples he provided in the memo, we would be looking at sharing safe travel routes with the families who are participating in the hub. He also looked at which roads individuals or students would be walking and where they're pedestrian controlled crosswalks. There's some examples for the Rogers and Lake Hill where they would be crossing a crosswalk. we can look at either having walking groups with parents, or having a staff member walk to that crosswalk. There are many instances where students do not cross the road, so they stay on one side of the road and they can make their way there. We would be looking to work with PACs to see if there are parent volunteers who can either do a walking type of school bus or facilitate transportation, as we do with other events and other activities in elementary school. And also, as we talked at the last meeting, we may have TAs from high schools who are taking this as a course and could make their way to the elementary school to walk their students or walk the students to the hub. So those are some examples. And again, looking at each of the hubs, it was designed to minimize travel distance between the schools. And there are some situations where there is a longer travel, one being the travel between Vic West and Macaulay. So we would reach out to those two schools and see what we could do to facilitate maybe a carpooling.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. All right, folks. Yeah, we appreciate the update and further information about the planning. Anybody have any questions for the superintendent in relation to the update? And again, I'll start with our partners and then turn to trustees. Yeah, Nissa, go ahead.
So I'm bringing forward some questions that were put to the BC PAC on the subject of the strings hubs. And first and foremost, there's a recognition that with the hub model, it's not equitable for all families. So this could result in reduction in access to elementary strings. The safety aspect, I think, has been addressed in this letter, but there was a question about clarification about the time of day, and are the students expected to walk there or back, or is it just one way because they would be attending a strings class at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day? So would there be impacts to learning time? And then the note that some of the groups would be 6 out of 15 of the groups would be walking more than 2 kilometers. And I think that was also spoken to by Superintendent Witten's comment about addressing the distance. Already there's an awareness of that, but that was something that came up in our discussions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Superintendent, is there anything that you wanted to speak to now, or are you just noting it down and we'll speak to it at another time?
I want to thank BC PAC for sharing. I did make notes. So I think just to clarify, if there's a school that is a one school hub, then those classes are planned right now to occur before school. So they would come early and then they'd be in their school. If it's a multiple school hub, then those are planned for after school. So that's when they would be making their way to that second school hub. I think as we continue to look at this, there's different ways to be flexible, whether for the first half of the year, it's all at one school and we're arranging transportation at one school and then flipping it halfway, or working on, as was discussed, 2 days a week and having it in one school one day and the other school the other. So they're traveling 1 day of the week, but I have written these down and thank you for the feedback.
Thank you, Nissa, and thank you, Superintendent Witten. Cindy, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I have a few questions. The first question is equipment I noticed that some of the hubs are being held at schools that haven't traditionally had a strings program. So I'm thinking about music stands in particular. Will they be provided music stands or have a budget to buy music stands?
Superintendent, did you want to, are you able to address that tonight?
I can try. Associate Arts has done the majority of the work, but we've had many discussions around this. So we base the hubs on the number of students currently in taking strings this year. And so what we would be looking at is either finding the places that have the strings and may not be one of the hubs and moving stands and looking at equipment. We've also had dialogue around when there are larger numbers, if the numbers come to fruition next year, of having potentially one day a week with dividing the two groups up. That's what we have come to understand that some of the elementary schools did this year, rather than have 2 45-minute sessions, they may have had one a week. I think what we really do need to do is lean into the music teachers in the schools, as well as the principals and vice principals, to see what is occurring and where we need to make adjustments. But just with regards to your question on budget, I don't believe there's a budget attached to this specifically for equipment or stands.
Thank you, Superintendent. Cindy, did you have any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for saying about splitting the class, because regardless of subject area, teaching potentially 50 grade 5s in one class doesn't seem very safe or conducive to successful teaching. So thank you for mentioning that. So I'm also wondering, talking about high class sizes, I just want to recognize, and there is a question, combining jobs into one school doesn't necessarily equate to half the work. It's still the same number of emails, same number of assessments, if the numbers are going to be the same and combined, the same number of emails, that sort of thing. So if hypothetically, if the class sizes are too big, hypothetically, could there possibly, okay, I have to be careful about a cap size on a class. Just thinking of safety for the students in the class and teaching effectively the subject.
I think what we would be looking at is sort of addressing each of those as they come forward. I think what we found this year is that that's teacher in the school addressed based on the number of students they had coming to them. We had the total number of students, but we didn't actually have what each teacher was deciding to do within that total. So I think as we move forward and look at this, we certainly have and should review as the year progresses and make adjustments as necessary. The budget that is there is the budget we've received to make this work. But I think within that, we will see different areas maybe that have larger numbers that we need to adjust.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Superintendent. Okay, any other questions in relation to the update? I'm going to move to trustees now. Thank you for your patience. Trustee Kwan, and I believe Trustee Painter, did I miss you? Did you? Yeah, sorry about that. Do you mind? Sorry. Trustee Painter, thanks for your patience. I know you had your hand up first, and then I'll go to Trustee Kwan.
Thank you, Chair. So my comments they're not questions as much as comments, but the point made about availability of necessary equipment like music stands, any other equipment, these are all just part and parcel of delivering a program that was directed by the board. If the estimates weren't taken into, if those things weren't taken into consideration, then I'm expecting to see recommendations coming back to the board on how this program is going to run. Same way with any kind of commuting between schools. This is not something that I would be prepared to leave on an ad hoc basis. There has to be something secure here. This is part of school programming as far as I'm concerned, which means that if we have students moving from one school to another, then we're looking at EAs or other staff who are trained and equipped to move the kids between locations in a safe manner, wait there for them, and return them, because the last thing we want to do is create more barriers because kids are in out of school care and can't necessarily migrate to and from, etc. So all that stuff, hate to say it, this was the program that was proposed. Our job is to make it work. So it's not about we can't do it anymore. It's about how we're going to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. Superintendent, what did you want to comment on the comment? And if not, then that's fine as well. I just want to make sure you had some space to do so if you wish. All right, Trustee Kwan, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. I really actually appreciate this being brought forward. A couple of questions. First of all, was just with regards to the recommendations that are being brought forward, and especially commuting with or communicating with PACs or families, and how that communication would be done. How do you envision kind of reaching out and having that communication happen? That would be my first question.
Thank you. Go ahead, Superintendent, when you're ready.
What I would envision is at the start of the year, when we have students express an interest, we would also want to ensure that their parents give consent for us to be able to share information amongst and give that information to PACs if they're willing and able to help us with the communication. So what we do every year is seek consent from parents to be able to share their information and contact, and that's what we would do with this one.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Trustee Kwan, or?
I don't have a follow-up. I have a whole other one, but I'm happy to wait and let Cindy go.
Okay, thank you very much. That's appreciated. Cindy, you go ahead, and then we'll go back to Trustee Kwan.
Thank you. I'm just wondering when the jobs will be posted.
I believe that they are with the District Principal of Human Resources.
Oh, we lost you. Sorry, it got muted. I don't know if the wind muted it. I'm not sure what happened. But thank you.
My friend, Associate Superintendent Powell, who
Not the wind.
no, well, no, we are, I believe, anticipating that these are posted in the summer round.
Thank you very much. You had a follow-up, Cindy? Go ahead.
So does that mean that they will be posted as continuing as opposed to temporary?
That I would need to check on.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thanks for the question, Cindy. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just maybe hoping that the wider public might be watching, and the question is really more facetious than anything, but perhaps maybe there's an opportunity for us to work with BC Transit. Maybe BC Transit would be willing to give us some vouchers or something to help students get to the hubs as well. So just a thought.
Thank you very much, Trustee Kwan. All right, folks. One more final call before I move us on in our agenda. If there are no further, oh, sorry, Nissa, I nearly missed you. I'm so sorry. Go ahead. Luckily, I looked up from my computer for a moment. Go ahead when you're ready.
I believe students under the age of 12 are free on BC Transit within Victoria currently. So there's that piece, but are you meaning like about like providing a bus?
No, through the chair, if I may, it's just students in Victoria proper that actually live in the city limits. So a lot of our students are Saanich, so unfortunately they don't get that privilege.
So
Go
just
ahead. Yeah.
through the chair for information, the BC PAC provided a letter of support to Saanich Council for the expansion of transit into Saanich and putting that forward to UBC, I believe, as well.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, I'm going to move us on. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions, and Superintendent for the update. Again, it's appreciated. I'm going to move us on to trustee questions at G. Trustees, go ahead, Trustee Kwan.
I'm on a roll. So we're going to stick with the music, and I just wanted to check in with the status on the TOR for the Music Equity Ad Hoc Committee. Did we pass that last time, or did I miss something? I can't remember now.
Superintendent, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. I believe it went forward. I hope it went forward. I think we received feedback and those changes were made.
We can review our motions to see if we ended up approving it. If not, then we will bring it to the September board meeting and make sure we've closed that loop. Yeah, we'll have to double check our motions. It's a good question, Trustee Kwan. we will double check the motions we passed in the last couple of months just to make sure it's progressed where it needs to go. And if not, we'll bring it back to September board. Thank you very much. Was there any other questions from trustees before I move this on again? Okay. Okay, so this brings us to E2 in our agenda. This is the Secretary Treasurer's report. Again, Secretary Treasurer, I am going to turn the floor over to you to present or highlight anything from your report.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have anything in particular to highlight, but included in the memo are some of the activities since the last board meeting on May 27th.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions in relation to the Secretary Treasurer's report? Again, either the board or trustees? Okay, hearing none, we do have a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61 Greater Victoria receive the Secretary Treasurer's report as presented. May I have a mover? Thank you, Trustee Mabobi, and seconded by Trustee Kwan. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of receiving the Secretary Treasurer's report with a show of hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, trustees. Okay, so our next item is under E2B. This is the 2023 Climate Change Accountability Report. Secretary Treasurer, will you be presenting that report tonight?
Chair, it's included in the agenda package. I believe Brian Leslie, our energy manager, presented it at OPS in May. The report was submitted by the deadline on May 31st. So this is just bringing you the final report to the board so that the full board and everyone can see what was submitted. So I don't have a presentation myself. Brian isn't here to answer questions, but if you have any, we could do our best.
Yeah, that's fine. No, that's fine. Was there any changes made, Secretary Treasurer, to the version that was presented? Do you know?
I know we made some minor wording changes, like grammatical changes since the version that we saw, but I am not sure if it was different from what went to OPS. I don't believe that there was anything significant that changed between the two meetings.
Thank you. Okay, trustees, is there anything we want to send back in the way of questions or anything that we can ask the Secretary Treasurer to clarify, or questions that you have, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move us on in our agenda. We are now at C, and so this is a memo in relation to the 2024-2025 annual budget student device ratios. Secretary Treasurer, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I will just provide an overview of the memo, and then just recognizing as well that our district vice principal from Information Technology for Learning is also in attendance here if you have any questions particularly around the process. So we've included in the memo where this is coming from. So during the 2024-2025 annual budget process, there was a budget balancing initiative that was approved by the board, which reduced the student device ratios down for both all levels, actually, middle and secondary to 3:1 from 2:1, and elementary to 4:1 from 2:1. So it was about a $600,000 reduction, essentially a 90% reduction of what had been planned to spend on a refresh for next year. It also happened to coincide with a significant retirement of devices that had reached their maximum age, and they needed to be retired for security and data privacy reasons. Also, in this process, to get things to the ratio that was approved by the board, it will deplete the student device inventory. So the first step was to decommission the student devices that were posing a potential cybersecurity risk. So due to the age of the devices, at the end of this year, we will be decommissioning between 4,500 and 5,500 devices. Just a caveat on those numbers, IT for Learning, they've done their absolute best to try to get an inventory of devices that are in the schools. There's not 100% confidence in the numbers, so this is our best estimate at this point. We won't really know for sure until the department gets into the schools to see what devices are there. There will be a top up from current inventory to get each school to at least the new ratios that have been approved by the board. So now moving forward, if we've done those things and we're at ratio, we're starting to look at how do we manage that on a go forward basis. And so I think we've come to a consensus that if there are school-based funds, so operating grant or special purpose funds that schools are opting to use to purchase devices, that those devices would become part of the ratio that is held at the school. Where we've come across greater uncertainty is around PAC funded purchases, and we're just looking to get some feedback from the board around the balancing initiative and the intention of maintaining those ratios and how, if at all, PAC funding may be impacted. Some of the things that we've talked about is, can a PAC improve the ratio for a school? And things that we've considered is how that might create inequity between schools. Some schools have PACs who have the capacity to do that kind of fundraising and others do not. And then what do we do with those devices that are purchased by the PAC? Are they shifted to IT to track, to repair, and to replace if there's no budget beyond the ratio? So we're looking for feedback on the two scenarios that are there. And the first one is that PACs can continue to fund student devices for schools, but those devices will become part of the school's ratio. And that the number of devices at the school will just be maintained at the board approved ratio. Or alternatively, that PACs would not fund student devices for schools to avoid that creation of inequity. So I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions around the process, Josh is available. Otherwise, I look forward to your feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer. Yeah, there's a couple of things context-wise, just to kind of ground our conversation and to contextualize certainly the board's deliberations around this. So what we saw sort of during COVID was a significant amount of funding coming from both the federal government and the province to rapidly increase the number of devices in the system to help support children who were remote learning for the first time. And also to support children who maybe didn't have access to a device in the home. And so we departed significantly from our previous device ratio, sort of pre-COVID. We also had the sort of further nuance of having, as the Secretary Treasurer mentioned, some PACs being uniquely positioned to make considerable investments into devices without us necessarily as a district knowing how we were going to be able to afford to maintain those devices moving forward, or indeed to replace them moving forward. So the budgetary correction was intended to kind of bring us back to a more normal state of ratio in light of our post-COVID world that we're living in. But at the same time, kind of recognizing that there would need to be a discussion as a school district about what is our best practice? What is the best case scenario? What is, from a learning perspective, how many devices do we ideally want to have at each level and why? And the nuance, of course, that the board appreciates is that every year, of course, the student learning profile changes. And so it might be that we have students enter the system or go from level to level with unique needs that involve additional devices. And we need to, of course, build in some mechanisms to allow schools to adapt to that change in the profile of the learners in their buildings. So by no means did the board think that we would make a budgetary decision and that would be the end of it. I think this is a part of a deeper discussion about what we think is best practice at each level when it comes to the use of devices. And that is very much a conversation that needs to occur as a school community and with the input of educators. So with that context and a little bit of background behind what we were thinking when we were looking for balancing items in our budget, I'm going to open the floor. Nissa, thanks for your patience. Go ahead and kick us off.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan, and through the chair. No, I just this was a topic that has come up with among PACs, and there's been quite a bit of discussion, largely centered around the equity piece, as there's recognition across the district that there's quite a lot of variation in what PACs can fundraise for or will fundraise for, and then to the points already made about then those devices are in the school, but then the cost of maintaining them then becomes an issue. And so I think if I can broadly generalize, and parents will let me know if I'm speaking out of turn, I'm sure. But I think there's broad support for advocating for the board to advocate to the ministry about the importance of having appropriate, secure digital tools in the classroom provided to all students by the Ministry of Education in this situation to support education and ensure equity across our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Nissa. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think, there's lots of nuances to a decision like this. And, I think when you take a hard stop at, anything, there's definitely situations where it might become necessary to look at ratios. I think Chair Duncan, you kind of touched on it when you said, there may be needs in the school with regards to learners who absolutely need those as tools for their learning with differing abilities and that as well. And I think that's part of the plan to look at why schools might have decided to spend some of their budget or grants on additional devices. So looking kind of at what the rationale would be for going outside of perhaps a device ratio. As far as PACs go, I guess my concern would be, when we think of equity, we don't think about saying no to everything so everyone has the same, it's kind of, you look at, taking a box away from everyone so no one can see over the fence rather than putting those boxes up so everyone can see over the fence. So, in that sense, my I guess my thoughts on this subject would be, let's look at a way that we could still utilize PACs if they really want to go that route, but create equity within that kind of system. So, a suggestion might be looking at kind of what average maintenance costs for a device life might be and incorporating that in what PACs would give in order to buy devices. Another suggestion might be that if a PAC is wanting to buy a device for their own school, that it would be doubled. And that means that when they're buying a device for their own school, they're also buying a device for another school so that we can keep those ratios level. That was just some of the thoughts that I had. So, I think there's definitely a differing way to look at this. And I think we can definitely do some good things. And, I know we hear from BC PAC that, there is an interest in equity, and I can see PACs, if they're wanting to help their school out with devices, would probably be willing to help other schools out with devices if that was kind of the way the district wanted to go. So just some thoughts there for sure.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Perhaps, Josh, would you mind weighing in a little bit around the way that IT currently manages student devices from a continuity planning, refresh rates, and cycles perspective?
Yeah, and I need to apologize right up front with my voice tonight. I'm battling a bit of an illness, but bear with me if I start coughing. We life cycle devices on an average of 5 to 7 years, dependent on the device. So our primary devices are an iPad, typically used in the lower grades, and Chromebook, which is used in grades 4 to 12 typically. That's kind of stretched over the years. For a Chromebook, we say 5 to 7 years, and it's we have to have a range because we're unsure of when the operating system or the browser is going to no longer be secure. Typically it's in that range. iPads we know and we can plan for up front. We typically know when the iOS is going out of date and when the device is no longer updatable. We plan for decommission. So we're at a point this year where a lot of devices are coming up in terms of their security deadlines, and that poses a risk from a student data privacy lens. We manage them through a Jamf mobile device management system, and that allows us to maintain our inventory and deploy apps for iPads. And then we have our Google admin console for Chromebooks, and that again provides us with inventory where those devices are assigned to, and that allows us to get a pretty accurate inventory of what we have out in schools. But there are some nuances there, like the rapid deployment during COVID and the return of those devices. Those are all factors that add to the complexity of excuse me, of this project.
Thank you very much. No, that's really, really helpful. Are you seeing, so do requests, so when there's unique learning needs, so the profile of the student population changes from year to year, how do those requests get managed? Is it from the school directly to you folks in IT? And how are those requests managed? Who looks at that and decides, okay, yeah, that's a legitimate need, that's a new need, we need to be funding that and deploying an additional device to help that student?
Yeah, so like many things technology-wise, it's complex. They typically come through our purchasing department, and that would be an assessment done at the school for specific needs. It might be a specific department or federal funding for something. It might be a grant, might be an individual student. And then there's also our inclusive education department who would support devices through SetBC, and we get those devices for a variety of reasons that become ours over time. So there are a multitude. Those are just a couple of examples, but there are a multitude of ways that we currently take in requests for devices, and we typically process those and put our security specs on it and our profiles, and they get inventoried and sent out to the district.
That's great. No, that's super, super helpful. I think that leads us back to kind of where we started our discussion. And I think there's growing agreement that this is a nuanced issue. It isn't just a matter of setting a ratio and saying, okay, we're done. That there are nuances and needs within the system that we have to take account of when we're planning from a budgetary perspective, but also from year to year in terms of student supports. So perhaps, I don't know, Secretary Treasurer, how much clarity we can give you tonight, other than I think what I'm hearing around the table is that, at least in this school year, really what we're trying to achieve is some kind of parity, but there needs to be flexibility. It can't, like, the board, I would never want to, suggest that by putting forward a budgetary direction, which is meant to help balance our budget and address the proliferation of devices during the COVID years in part, that we don't recognize that there is nuance that you have to address operationally and react to operationally. So I do feel like there is a need to commit to having some further discussion about what that looks like from an operational lens. What are the learning needs at the school-based level that need to be addressed and considered beyond just establishing a basic baseline ratio. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't think we're going to, certainly we won't get there tonight, but I wonder if we can commit to coming back perhaps through education policy and directions. It could really come to either standing committee and maybe with some recommendations initially from staff to start the conversation. I don't know what you think about that, but I think with sort of some steer that I'm hearing tonight is that we want to get to that ratio but we also don't want to be doing it in a way that ends up creating an equity issue for some of our most vulnerable learners. Schools need to have some flexibility around their devices to make sure that those vulnerable learners' needs are addressed beyond the baseline ratio that we put forward through our budgetary direction. Is that enough for tonight in terms of direction? And with the commitment that we're going to come back and have a deeper dialogue about this in September or October?
I think we're definitely having the same conversations around those students who are needing those devices for learning. I don't think we're questioning that at all. It's more around on an operational basis. I think we're probably good for this current year that we're in now. But as we move into the new year and we start to get requests for purchases, like right now, we've kind of put a stop on it to try to see if we can get to those ratios. I think Josh and his team are thinking they can have everything done by around November. And then we were hoping to try to get a sense of how schools are managing, at least the ones that have a reduced ratio. And then be able to get some feedback on that. But I don't think we'll be at that parity point even to be able to make that call. So we will need to have some direction around the PAC funding, I think, in fairly early in the new year, if that helps.
Yeah, that's really helpful. It gives us a sense of like timeline from your perspective. So thank you. Nissa, yeah, go ahead.
Just around through the chair, taking into consideration the thoughts that Trustee Kwan put forward around equity, could it be possible to explore that an option of, if PACs want to fundraise for devices, that there is a district account that they contribute to, and then the district applies those funds with an eye to the best needs across the district. So allowing for PACs to support our students, but also taking that lens of the considerations around maintenance and equity.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Appreciate that. Secretary Treasurer, did you have any comments about any of the sort of operational realities of doing something like that?
I might not be the best person to answer that particular question around like a centralized account. Josh, I don't know if you can weigh in, or if we just need to take that away and just consider all of the pieces.
I think we need to take it away, but I'm hoping for a little bit of clarity. So I'm just concerned if a school that typically, raises more PAC dollars, for instance, they put their money into a central fund. I'm looking at that playing out where that school that puts in the money actually doesn't get any devices out of that. And I'm just wondering if you can clarify if that is kind of the direction we would go with what you're proposing. Sorry, through the chair.
Yeah, I was doing a one for all for one kind of approach here, though exposing myself as that is kind of a naive idea, because understanding that the groups, the PACs that are going to be doing the fundraising would want to see the benefit going to their student communities, most definitely, but also acknowledging that if a portion of the funding could be directed more centrally, then there could be contributions made where you see the immediate impact within your school community, and then also raise the ratios across the district as well.
It's a difficult one, because part of the reason we end up in these sort of situations is because we have, individual PACs contributing in certain schools and then not in others, and then we end up with more devices maybe than we've planned for, or that might even be ideal. So I feel like the other part of this that we really need to have a further discussion about is, you know, again, like from a pedagogy perspective, like what is the kind of ideal in from level to level? What should we be shooting for again as a baseline? And then what do we need to be doing to take account of those unique student needs from year to year? And so, and creating some flexibility so that we can pivot appropriately to address those. Because I don't want to lose the fact that it's not just about the budget, it's also about practice and learning. And yeah. Trustee Painter, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I can't help but think that parents are always going to look out for what they can do for their kids, just basic parental motivation. And you know, the first downfall I see to any kind of situation where a PAC is fundraising and contributing to a general fund or anything else is that that's really going to be a disincentive to the have PAC, essentially. You know, there could be some good, well-intentioned and motivated people, and I applaud them, and I'd like to think that from time to time I might be among them. But I also know that there's gonna be a lot of parents who are just gonna say, well, I'll buy Junior their own device and they can bring that to school and they'll have a device. And you know, bypass the entire conversation about PACs. So I really think that we should revisit this conversation right around election time and remind parents at whatever school they're going to that if they really want to see equity in our schools and not have to feel like they have to reach into their own wallet to provide necessary services to our students, that they should be mindful of that choice when it comes time to vote in this fall's election. So that's my little bit of snark for the evening.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. All right, folks. Subject to any final comments, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you, Secretary Treasurer, for bringing it to our attention, and we will make sure we don't lose sight of that and come back to the table at the appropriate time to have a further discussion. Thank you, Josh, for despite your illness, being willing to contribute tonight. Appreciate your time. Okay, so folks, we are now at question period, F. And so just going to go quickly over the rules. So we have 15 minutes allocated for questions. We allocate 1 question per individual requester. Acting Associate Superintendent, are you going to assist me with question period this evening? And if so, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have a total of 4 questions, Chair. I did send those to you by email.
Okay. Let me just have a look. Just sorry, bear with me. Okay. So the first one is, have you looked to principals to research school police liaison involvement around incidences in their schools to determine if the police officer in their school assisted the staff with resolving the problem or hindered them in resolving the problem? We did, through the 2.5-year review process, have representatives of the VPVPA, which is the Principal and Vice Principals Association, represented on the review committee. We also, through the public survey, had feedback from various members of our learning community, including principals and vice principals. We also received, during the period of the review, a letter from the VPVPA on behalf of their members outlining their perspective. And again, there is an FAQ and a recent board statement if the individual is interested in sort of learning more about the board's decision. Okay. The next question, just bear with me while it opens. It says, did this board not consult with the 4 houses prior to the removal of the school liaison program because of their support for the program? No. So the way that the previous board set up the review process was through an ad hoc committee. That ad hoc committee had a terms of reference which governed its activities. In the terms of reference, the four houses were invited to send representatives to participate in the review committee, as were other partner groups in our school district invited to participate by sending representatives to the review committee. And so we also again had a public survey which was sent to our learning community, which is another avenue for participation. We also at the time had our communications going through our Indigenous Education Department. And I think as a result of that, it created some difficulty in terms of ensuring that there was another potential avenue for communicating with the board directly. And so what I would say to the individual requester is that no, the board did not, during the period of the review or following it, have any indication directly from either nation. But we did invite all four houses to participate in the review committee work, along with all of our partners. Now, number 3 is, just bear with me. Perhaps I should also make clear, since we have an opportunity to, that, you know, when we invite partners to participate, we have no say in who or if they send somebody to the table. We did have one nation send one of their directors of education who participated for a period of time on the review committee. Okay, so without further ado, question number 3. Sorry, just bear with me. I want to make sure got the right question. Okay, so the meetings of the board are to be open to the public. When will the board allow meetings with public participation? So the public is welcome to participate in our board meetings, whether they're in person or virtual, through the same mechanisms that they would normally be participating. So through a request to make a presentation, through writing to the board, and through question period. So whether we're meeting virtually or we're meeting in person in a board in meeting environment, there are clear structures and points during the meeting where the public can participate, and that has not changed regardless of whether they're in person or virtual. But I would say to the requester or the individual asking the question that this is something, the return to in-person or some kind of a hybrid form of meeting is something that the board is still on our agenda. We have tasked our superintendent with looking at the costs associated with upgrading the boardroom so that we can return to some kind of in-person option. And so stay tuned. And our final question tonight. So our children, your students, want to know what steps has this board made to resolve these issues so students feel safe to use the school bathrooms? Superintendent, I think this is more of an operational question. I mean, from a board perspective, we would expect that if there are safety concerns in schools that our staff are addressing those through either the appropriate protocols or if in appropriate cases, bringing in external partners, you know, as is appropriate. But I think this is certainly more an operational question than a board question, if you want to weigh in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as an operational perspective from staff to school staff, we are talking with principals and vice principals if they have concerns with regards to access to washrooms for students. We have a variety of mechanisms in place if we're speaking specifically about washroom access. We have principals and vice principals who are always out in hallways and looking for who is accessing the washrooms and what may be occurring in there. We also always invite for feedback or concerns to be shared with the principal or vice principal or a staff member who is in the vicinity. And also just sometimes when the washroom doesn't appear to be accessible, then that washroom may be closed for a period of time so that it's moved to a different location, or not all washrooms are accessible. So I think there's a variety, and I think we're talking about different levels too. I think secondary is different than middle, which is different than elementary, but at any point, we're always looking to listen to the student voice and also the parent voice and hear from them if they have specific concerns with the school or location.
Thank you, Superintendent Whitten. So I guess, again, just to reiterate that please do raise any concerns with your school principal or vice principal. There are then channels of process to resolve concerns, which would be escalated up through the appropriate district senior leadership team member. Also, the board also has a bylaw appeal process, which again might be appropriate depending on the context. All right. I think Associate Superintendent, I've got all the questions. I think there was just 4. Okay. All right. Thank you again to the requesters for taking the time to submit your questions to the board. We appreciate your engagement and your time. We are now at public disclosure of in-camera items at G1 and G2. We have 2 Section 72 reports there for information. We are now at H, new business, and we have 1 item of new business under H1. There is a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, direct the superintendent to implement a district hiring freeze for all exempt and excluded staff, excluding school-based staff, for the 2024-25 financial year, 1st of July 2024 to the 30th of June 2025, and further bring any urgent hiring requests to the Board of Education for consideration. And I wonder if we have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Gagnon and seconded by Trustee Painter. All right, so I'm going to open the floor up to some discussion. First, I guess I want to turn to our partners around the table who might want to weigh in on this, might have some comments that they would like to share with us before I turn it over to the board. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy, when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm a little bit concerned with this motion because I think everything is connected, and because there have been many cuts through the budget process, that there may be ramifications for the GVTA members and our students regarding this. So I think, yeah, maybe I'll just stay there. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and just to clarify, the motion is exclude school-based staff, but we appreciate that whenever you put a freeze on, or, you know, stop and consider whether you're going to invest in resources wherever those resources are, there can be and are impacts. And I think, unfortunately, the board is dealing with the reality that next year we very well may be dealing with another shortfall. So it is a difficult situation to be in, and so we have to be super mindful about where we invest those dollars when it comes to resources. Darren, hello. I don't see you, but I see your name and I see your virtual hand. Welcome. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. I apologize for the camera. I'm having some technical difficulties here. I was just wondering, what is the foreseeable impact for the facility staff, QP 382 in particular, obviously, in regards to positions that have been vacant for a while and still haven't been filled? Is that something that's going to is this going to have an impact on the backfilling those positions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the idea behind this motion is that when it comes to exempt or excluded staff at the district level, we would be looking at requests for hiring on a case-by-case basis. And so that would allow some opportunity for, in every case, for some dialogue. So if staff feel that there's an urgent need and there's a position that's been vacant for a period of time, but there's an urgent need to fill it in this, coming school year or financial year, I should say, then we would expect that staff would bring that to the board's attention, and then the board would consider it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
Nissa, thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan. And through the chair, I would say that if the motivation is to, in light of a potential budget shortfall, try and ensure that cuts stay away from students and student services, then this seems like a somewhat unavoidable option that needs to be looked at. So again, understanding that in some cases, it seems like we're between a rock and a hard place if there is no increase in budget to the district. I think this may be an unavoidable option if we want to prioritize keeping cuts away from direct impacts to students.
Yeah, it's just such a difficult one. I think you hit the nail on the head. It isn't really a difficult situation we continue to find ourselves in year after year without any sort of significant increase in funding. Because we recognize that everything everyone does to contribute to the learning environment is important. But at the end of the day, there's certain sort of realities and priorities that, we're forced to really consider very, very carefully. So really, this is just, it's like a placeholder to say, okay, we have to be very, very careful about our spending. This is one way where we have to consider it case by case to make sure that we're making the best choice and making sure that we're keeping the resources as close to the classroom as possible. So yeah, it's not ideal, but it's certainly one mechanism. Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, I think in summary, a lot of what's been said already, but we recognize that we have a senior leadership team and a level of excluded and exempt staff that are doing probably at least 1.5 to 2 times what their job actually entails. We have very lean staff there. It's not, we recognize that, and so it's not a good thing. I mean, it doesn't sit well, I don't think, with anyone. To have to put something like that in place. But I think as a board, we're looking to find more proactive ways in order to mitigate kind of that shortfall that we have to find at the budget season. So this is one way, but I think, we're open to other ways to do that as well. So it's rock in a hard place, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Sarah, welcome. Go ahead with the
Hi,
floor.
thanks. Through the board. I mean, I've listened to a lot of our budget meetings. I'm well aware of how tight things are, but I'm very cautious. And I would echo Trustee Duncan's sentiments that I don't believe anyone in these exam positions has spare time in their day. And I wonder where that goes if those positions aren't filled, and the pressure it pushes down onto school-based administrators who are trying to be focused on our students. And I also wonder about the loss of talent. If there's no positions to go up into because we close them every time, we're potentially moving our talent out of our district because there's no position to go up into and help lead. So I'm cautious this might have much bigger ripple effects than we're seeing of balancing a budget for 1 year.
Thank you, Sarah. No, appreciate that. Yeah, we end up back in these discussions and back to the same conclusion, which is that we really need to all band together and make sure that the message to the province is very clear and loud, that we need to have more funding, because that we're running out of options and creative solutions to continue to balance our budget, which we have a legal obligation to do. And it's not ideal. None of us are happy with, the options that we have left. But short of some additional funding, some significant additional funding, we're going to be in this situation year on year. So yeah, I really appreciate all your comments and your candor. yeah, I find it heartening at least that we can have these dialogues and they're difficult conversations. And yeah, I wish we didn't have to have them, but unfortunately we do. Nissa, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, just to comment, I mean, I agree that the ramifications of talent loss and losing a cohort of qualified folks who may want to move up into those positions if they just disappear. I mean, one can draw an analogy to missing a middle school band. You know, it's all time sensitive because of the cyclical nature of the work that we do. You know, a missed year is not just a missed year it's not just a missed fiscal year, it's a year out of everyone's lives in the community. So there's an election in the fall.
Yes, and there lies an opportunity. Yeah. All right, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate, again, your contributions tonight. Okay, trustees, I think we've reached that point whereby we need to do any final deliberation that we want to do before I call the question. So trustees, any final thoughts before I do call the question? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? And that is unanimous. All right, thank you, trustees. And again, thank you to our partners and our staff around the table tonight. Appreciate it. We don't have any notice of motions as far as I'm aware. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so that does lead us to adjournment. So trustees, may I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, trustee Gagnon, seconded by trustee Mabobi. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Before we switch off, I just want to say on behalf of the board, have a really restful and happy break. We really appreciate all your hard work and your contributions around the table during the school year, and we look forward to seeing you all back in September. Take good care. Bye.